Hey there, Phillip. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good and happy. We actually have Paramount Tech joining us already. Good evening.
Say that three
Super.
times as
I
fast as
know.
you can.
It's late in the day, and I'd say I haven't had enough coffee, but
Oh, yeah. Where are they watching from? Is it YouTube or
Facebook.
Facebook?
Yep.
Facebook. Are we doing
Yeah.
YouTube
Yes,
tonight?
it's streaming live to YouTube right now.
Yay, we're so
So
advanced. It's
I
very
know
exciting.
that it's
And I had
working great.
nothing I had nothing to do with it.
We just can't have Bishop Long on again because he's the one who got us off of Facebook, off of YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
I still tease him about that. It's like, of course, we share your show on YouTube, and next thing we know,
Oops.
but
You've
he
done
did
well
tell me
getting.
he tells me that happens a lot
Oh, okay.
with him. But yeah. So anyway, welcome everyone. We're excited to be here tonight. We do have two guests who will be joining us to discuss hosting paranormal events. Looking forward to having that happening today. I'm actually ready to take notes myself.
Yeah, I mean, they were wonderful. While we wait for them to get
Hmm.
here, we can talk about the event that my team's going to be
Hmm.
hosting. And
Yep.
gosh, I guess well, 4 weeks from today, June 10th. But we're doing a fundraising ghost hunt event. We've never done it before. And this historic location contacted us. We'd investigated the house before and found a lot of activity. And they really liked the way our team behaved and our professionalism. And when they decided they want to do something, they asked us if we'd be interested. And that's something I've always wanted to do is, lead ghost hunts, but in a more educational way. Well, look who's here. Well, we'll talk about that later.
How's it going, everybody?
Good, good. How are
Sorry,
you
Chris.
doing?
Good. Chris and I were both on the way home, so we were running. Oh, my son wants to say hello to here.
Okay.
Oh, big man. You wave hi.
Hello.
He's camera
Uh,
shy.
how old is he?
He just turned 2 years old.
Oh,
Right, big man.
wow. That's
Time
sweet.
flies. I remember when you announced you were pregnant, you and your wife.
Mm-hmm.
Does fly. Do you
Say
see
hi.
yourself?
Can you wave?
Can you wave?
Look, see Phillip? He's waving to you.
Who are these weirdos? No.
So, yeah. So I just got home, so of course he's got to come and see what I'm
Oh,
up to.
need some daddy hugging. Yeah, that's sweet. My dogs are the same way for about 2 minutes.
And they run away.
It's like, okay, enough. Where's food? Where's dinner?
So I'm sure
And
at
my
some
dog
point
won't
my
leave my
daughter will.
side when I get home.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yes, you see yourself.
Yeah, now he's getting into it. It's like, oh, this is cool. I look good.
So how's it going? How's it going? It's been a while. It's been a hot minute.
Good, good. Christy says
Time
it's
that's fine.
Steve and Mini Steve.
Yes, I
Uh,
know, poor thing, right?
he's looking pretty comfortable in front of the camera now, though.
Yeah, now he's good.
He's like, yeah, I can get into this.
My daughter loves being in front of the camera. I'm sure at some point you'll see her run in the background, just go crazy. That's par for the course.
Do we want to wait for Chris? Just how long, or we want to?
He should be here probably momentarily. We both left at the same time, but
Mhm.
I think I'm a couple minutes closer. So yeah, we'll give it a minute. We'll see if he hops in, and then if not, we can get started.
Okay.
Just chat, chit
Yep.
chat.
And before we get started, Scott wants to know if you've seen anything extraordinary lately.
For all of us. Is this an all of
It's
us
been
question?
borne by me lately, so I have nothing to say to that one.
Geez, what did I do recently? Yeah, yes. So, recently, one of the things we kicked off season 12 of the Ghost Finders, um, and that's on Paraflix, by the way, anybody that wants to watch. And I know that we're going to be moving some of those episodes to, yes, don't press those, please. Move some of the episodes to Amazon Prime soon. But we kicked off season 12 filming at Randolph County Infirmary, in obviously Randolph County, Indiana. Um, and that was crazy. That was a really cool location. Um, one of the okay, yeah, Chris said he'll be here momentarily.
Had you been there before? Had you investigated the infirmary before? No, it was your
Nope.
first time.
Very first time going out there. It was a 12-hour drive.
Oh,
Chris and
wow.
I drove together, and got out there. It's an amazing location. Flattest land I've ever seen, ever. like I don't know. Really wasn't sure what to expect going out there, but it was flat. I felt like I could kind of see the rest of the entirety of the state from where I
Oh,
was.
wow.
Very very windy, and but we were in there. This was actually an experience Chris had, so he probably should share it. But we're buying time, right? So you okay? um, uh, we were getting ready to film. We were carrying all the equipment in. Chris and a few of the other crew members had went down into the basement, and they were kind of exploring, checking out the place. We kind of scouted for like photo ops and just getting B-roll and stuff like that. And one of the very first experiences was him and Lindsay, and I can't remember who else was with him, but all three of them saw this thing dart out from behind one of the actually the entryway. There's the stairs down, and so it looked like it was kind of hiding right there. They had, if anybody is familiar with Randolph County, we were down in the kitchen. All right, so that's in the basement. You go down the steps, it's all the way at the very very far into the building, and so they were down there just kind of checking it out, looking around, and looked back, and they see this black mass, this black shadow figure,
Oh.
and I believe he said it had yellow eyes,
Uh-oh.
but the eyes were not normal, like human distance, right? Like, we have eyes here. Like, they were like farther apart than what would be considered human, like humanoid. It was not a humanoid figure. And that kind of kicked off the weekend. Like that
Was
was
it in human shape? Did it have human shape to it, like arms, legs, head, neck, or was it just a mass?
he'll probably have to answer that one.
Okay.
I think he said it was just kind of a mass. Um, and I don't know.
But
But it was
the
interesting.
yellow eyes are interesting. I mean, that's a classic shadow figure
Mm-hmm.
in the specter category. Red or yellow glowing eyes. So that's pretty
Mhm.
cool.
So it was really interesting in that, like I said, kind of kicked off the weekend. That was literally like within the first little bit of being on site. So
Yeah,
I
the
can't give away too much from the episode, but it was a pretty cool episode. It's a really cool place. After that, the owner, um, you know, was absolutely amazing. First off, can't speak highly enough. Great folks. They're very hospitable. The location is fantastic. So like, I know you guys have probably been to abandoned asylums, infirmaries, hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times there are a lot of things that need to be fixed up, and
Yeah.
I mean it's very expensive. Wow, this is a segue, and Chris isn't even here yet. Um, so it's very expensive to um, restore and preserve these historical locations, and
Sure
so
is.
um, you know just the most basic of things, like a tiny hole in the ceiling, causes massive damage when you think about it, right? The
Yeah.
rain coming in, um,
Animals.
animals coming in. This place was pristine. I,
Uh,
I I mean, oh my goodness, was it clean? I mean, I wouldn't lick the floor, but um, I mean, in the sense that like I ran a dosimeter, when I was investigating normal hits for radiation, which tells me that wasn't seeing any issues like in the basement, especially with like radon buildup or anything like
Yeah.
that. Didn't see any mold. And I
Really?
know for you guys watching that have been to some of these locations, not RCI, but you know some of these other locations, you definitely spot black mold occasionally.
Yeah.
Um,
Even in
Mhm.
some homes I've been in, it's like, you know,
yeah.
you got mold behind your bed.
Mhm. Hey, yeah. By the way, that causes hallucinations, right? You having all the
Exactly.
experiences in your bed? That's weird.
Uh-huh.
Um. So yeah. So phenomenal location. They have done a fantastic job restoring the location. Still needs work, but there you go. Ross says we had to keep doing the
Sometimes you just can't help yourself. I mean, it's all right. We get it.
Sometimes I try. There's Tom. Man, I don't know. I didn't scroll down. I didn't see everybody here on the thing. Hi everybody. Hey Thomas. Rob, I'm not giving away spoilers. This was pre filming. It's good. I promise I'm not going to say anything else. Hey Amanda. How are you? Long time no see. Yeah. So it was great, man. I loved it. It was a fantastic location, fantastic place to investigate. I cannot recommend it enough. But we got to investigate this. I can't share where it is, um, other than it's obviously in Indiana. It's
Yeah.
close by. Um, but he had given us the access to investigate this undisclosed location on Sunday night. So we had wrapped up filming. We had investigated. We'd done our thing. And he's like, "Hey, by the way, I've got this new location down the road." And we're like, "Oh my god!"
New?
Uh,
What?
and yeah, I think a few folks had investigated it before. That doesn't really matter to me. I still want to check out a place, anyways. But it was phenomenal. Like the activity there, and I still have to compile it and pull it all together. I got to get his approval to share it. But I mean, I'm talking like we had somebody on the third floor of the building, somebody and a bunch of us in the basement of the building, and two people in one of the rooms on the first floor, and all of us um, heard this absolute massive crash, and it
Oh,
was so prominent that not only did we hear it, but we felt it and we could see it. We
hmm.
could see, I was in the basement and they had drop ceilings, and we could see the drop ceiling shaking.
Wow.
Chris was up on the second or third floor, whatever it was, and he could feel the vibration in his feet. And so I'm like, oh no, like Chris just ate it going down some steps. So I'm like, and Chris was upstairs doing a solo investigation, and I'm like, oh my god, he's dead. He's, So we're bolting up upstairs, like, okay, Chris, and at the same time, he's coming downstairs, and he's like, what are you guys doing? so so uh so it was wild. I can't wait because I'm hoping that once I get everything kind of finally pulled together and organized, I want to post it out there with their approval. I want to post
Yeah.
it out there and share it with people.
Now, is
I
this
did.
location, this new location, going to be something he's going to open up to the public, or?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. And it was well worth it. Russ says it was Rob shooting himself because you all trashed the rap party back at the hotel. we wanted to investigate. So we went into some investigating. But it was cool. Like I want to go back. I want to go back to RCI, but I want to go back to this location, this other place. It was that crazy. I did an Estes method session, and um Chris can probably share a little bit more about it, but it was something where um, Patty Negri was there with us. So this was, Patty Negri. She had to do a cleansing on me afterwards because, as I explained to her during that session, and I haven't felt this in the past, but it was as if somebody was co-hosting my body.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh, there's Chris.
Hey guys,
Ooh,
Um,
hey.
sorry
it was
about that.
like it was like somebody was like I was sharing the mic with somebody else. We're talking about the undisclosed location that we checked out in Indiana,
Oh, dude,
Christopher
that was
Robin.
sick.
Now, when you were feeling this, did you feel that it was negative? Like, this is not good. What's with me? Or were you just aware of that energy?
It felt nasty.
You felt bad? Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not saying necessarily demonic,
No,
because
it didn't
you
have
know
to be.
doesn't have to be, right. Asshole in life, asshole in death.
Did you say anything that you would not have normally said that you think may have been this other person?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So after the Estes method, I started roaming around, and I don't remember portions of that.
Yeah.
And Chris had to go and get me because at one point I had entered into one of these front rooms, and I was just standing in there by myself. And then after they brought me back to the main room, I ended up wandering upstairs by myself.
Mm.
And again, Chris had to come and hunt me down. And he told me my eyes were just straight black.
Oh. Yeah, this is one reason that we tell newcomers never always expect unexpected when you investigate. I mean, if you're out on your own doing this and something like this happens and you don't know how to handle it, or someone's there to handle it for you, you can get into big trouble.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of why you should never go out and do these things by yourself. If you don't know what you're doing, and you shouldn't, even if you know what you're doing, be by yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I trust the people. The ghost finders were like a family, and so
Yeah.
I trust them. I trust my team, Transcend Paranormal, and so having, I primarily like to investigate with people that I know and trust, and I know they're gonna have my back. Like
Absolutely. Yes.
if things get real, these are people that are not going to run. They're gonna make
And
sure.
leave you.
Well, some of them, Rhonda.
They'll pull you out, but they're going to run.
But yeah.
Come on, let's go.
Yeah. But they're the people that have your back, right? And so you
Yeah.
need that, going into some of these things. You can't.
Absolutely.
I remember early on investigating, just kind of like joining these random meetup groups, and it was rough because every time I would end up with different people investigating, and it's hard. Like, they turn off the lights. You're going to start investigating. Are you going to investigate, or are you going to get shanked? And so, like, like that sounds horrible,
Yeah.
but I need to be able to trust the people that I'm with in like the pitch black scenarios, right? Like, I don't want to, like, they're all of a sudden they're gone and you're just standing there by yourself, or something crazy happens. So
That's right.
I will say though, it was fun. Like everybody was like running over to Steve when like he was in the threshold of this room. They're like, "Oh my God, Steve, are you okay?"
and where did you go, Chris?
I beeline straight for the camera.
Uh-huh.
The camera and then like weaseled my way through everyone and just Blair Witch Project him and just like got the camera up in his face. I'm like, "What do you feel, Steve? How are you feeling right now?"
I'm like crying, my nose just oozing, right?
Oh my God. You didn't get it on camera. It didn't happen. So good thing you got the camera.
He did. He sure did.
That's a true friend right there.
Yeah. So it was an interesting experience. It was wild, and so that is my recent creepy thing.
That's pretty good. Hard to top that one.
So it talked about me licking the floor already, Chris. So.
Licking the floor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was talking about how Randolph County is like really clean. Like out of all the like abandoned places we've been, that place was like mint.
I will tell you, there
you go. There's Rob. We managed to keep Steve from licking the floor on this occasion.
I will tell you that like the entire time at Randolph County, like what baffled me was at one point we were in one room and we're like, man, like it would be nice if we had like blinds to change the light, too much natural light. And Daniel, the owner, he's like, "Oh, you need blinds?" And he pulls blinds down. Every single room had blinds
Oh
in
wow,
them. And I'm like, "Oh, I've never had this before."
that's being prepared. Good
Like,
for him.
I don't even have working blinds in my own house.
Oh, why do you think I got this backdrop behind me? I'm actually in a cardboard box.
Downtown. Oh my goodness. All right. I feel like we have bought an appropriate amount of time and everybody's just like, I don't see anybody even commenting at this point. So they're all like, oh my God, get to it.
They fell asleep.
Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Good times. All right. So what are we talking about tonight? What do we got?
Hosting a paranormal event tonight.
All right.
Well, Thomas is still awake. He says no way to falling asleep.
There we go. We got Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. All one of you out there.
1 out of 20 that are still on is awake. No.
And it's Thomas is only watching because I'm going to be roommates with him this upcoming weekend at Rochester Paracon. So
He wants to know what he's getting into.
yeah, he needs he needs to be here. Not that he wants to be here.
I will tell you, bring a set of earbuds or like earplugs.
Oh,
Well, luckily we have
Shake the
separate
room.
rooms, so he should be theoretically okay.
Mhm.
Theoretically, don't know for sure. Can't make any promises, but
I will tell you something that's like scarier than your snoring.
not
is
snoring.
4 or 5 hours in, because like I'll put in my like earbuds if we're like sharing a hotel room together. I'll put in my earbuds, and then 4 or 5 hours in, all of a sudden this deep voice goes, "Please charge," and I'm like, people like,
blast.
blast.
Yeah, extra underwear. Yes, apparently it will be.
So, Steve, let's talk about the first time you hosted a paranormal event. How did you learn about how to do it?
I didn't. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was definitely a trial by fire.
Yeah.
We hosted a town hall at Henricus Historical Park. And so they had asked us, this was the very first historic location that we partnered with. One of the things that my team does, Transcend Paranormal, is we partner with historic locations. And, not only do we, investigate, but we also try to give back. And the way that we do that is through hosting paranormal events, ghost tours, lectures, presentations. We also kind of embed ourselves and ingrain ourselves into their ranks. And I don't mean that in a negative term. I mean that in the sense that we volunteer. I volunteer a lot. Chris volunteers a lot. We both have done lots of different things that are not necessarily paranormal. But I mean, I've helped host tea parties. Like, I am not tea party material, but I have helped
I wouldn't
host
say that.
tea parties.
You with a cucumber sandwich.
Yeah, my little tea.
Yeah.
Pinky.
Yes, pinkies. I did that, and then I was corrected. They're like, nobody actually does pinkies. It's just, and I was like, oh, okay.
Like, yeah, well, I do.
So I pinkied out the rest of the time. Yeah. Yeah. So, man, I made a great pun on tea at that, and I can't remember what it was. Oh, thanks, Christy. I appreciate that. So yeah, so the first was they wanted to do like a paranormal town hall, talk about Paranormal 101, explain some of the equipment, share some of our findings from Henricus, yada yada yada.
Now, how long ago was this? So we can so
that was, I want to say it was probably 2009.
okay, so that's been a while.
I don't know how many years that is, but it's like 2008 and 2009.
That
Okay.
was BC. That was before Chris.
Yeah, BC, before Chris. So put together this whole presentation. It was death by PowerPoint is what I call it, where you put too much text on the screen so that people are busy reading your presentation instead of listening to what you're
That's
saying.
funny, yeah.
And I remember at one point there was a tree frog that jumped on the glass door leading outside. And I remember this, and I know this very well because one of the attendees stood up in the middle of the presentation and was like, "Look, a tree frog!" And so everybody got up and went to look at the tree frog and take photos of the tree frog. And that was where I was like, all right, this I get it. We gotta nail this a little bit better. Right. Like this was not good. If what you're saying is less entertaining than a
And then a tree
frog,
frog, yeah.
I was like, all right.
Reptile. Amphibian, excuse me.
So I was like, well, we're gonna have to fix that. So
Good
it was a
indicator.
little trial and error, right? Figuring out what works, what doesn't work, what people like, what people don't like, what not to sound horrible, but what sells and what doesn't sell, right? And how do you interact with people? How do you get people to listen? How do you get people to tune in, right? And to not necessarily like tune in like on a TV, but like tune in to what you're saying, what you're doing, how what your message is. How do you get people to listen to that? And so that was a huge undertaking. That's not easy, right? Like it has taken years upon years upon years upon years, and we're still tweaking it. We're still changing how we operate. We're still changing how we work, even to this day. But I think that's a good thing. Like, no, there's never a perfect way to do something.
Depends on who's there and the energy with the people that's there sometimes.
Yep. So that was the very first. It was a nightmare. And I think for most teams that run and host events, they probably have a similar nightmare story at the very beginning where things just didn't work. Things didn't work out one way or the other. Technology always sucks, and it always fails when you need it to not. Yeah, so it was interesting. And then you learn, you live and learn, and move on from there. So that was the very first. A wild success.
But how did you get, because you do pretty regular events at the tavern. How did you get hooked up with them? Tell everybody where it is, what it is.
Yeah. So, very first historical location that we partnered with was Henricus Historical Park. And it's actually on season 11 of the Ghost Finders. You'll see me on there. Chris, where are you?
Credits.
So I always like to joke with that. But Henricus is a great location. We started working with them. I actually reached out to them, the very first historic location that we partnered with. Learned a lot there, right? That's how we kind of, we started off as just looking for paranormal investigating, like just the ghosties, just the adrenaline rush. And we kind of fell in love and found this passion in history and the importance of history at a location.
Yeah.
And so that's when we, took really the next step and started hosting events. We did that for a year or two, got a lot better at it, and could actually keep people's attention versus the random animals that were hopping around outside. Still had the random, and I still do. My God, I still do. There's this one time I remember somebody like, funny enough, the same guy that called out the tree frog at another event, he actually like got up and started wandering, and then wandered into the back of this location, like back towards the kitchen during a presentation. And so we had to like stop and be like, hey, come on out, like that's a no-go zone. But eventually the executive director of the Hanover Tavern, which is a funny story in and of itself, reached out to Henricus and said, hey, I know you have a historical team or a paranormal team there. I see that they're hosting events. I see that they are doing investigating there. Um, we've had some things go on at the tavern as well, and wanted to see if they would if they would be interested in coming out. And so that's how we ended up getting hooked up at the tavern. And then in the same true sense that we just kind of started working and kind of moving, and helping out with these different places. Because I know Amanda Donaldson, she's at the Ferry Plantation in Virginia Beach, another great site, awesome place to investigate. She says volunteers are always needed at the haunted historical sites. That's how Cody and I became established at Ferry, right? Um, so that's the same deal, right? Like we started volunteering there, not just paranormal, but bringing bringing a body of volunteers that was not there already, that
Yeah.
was very missing. And um, just kind of one thing led to the next, and we started hosting investigations there. Funny enough, one of the first locations um, that um, that I reached out to was the Hanover Tavern, and it was right before the executive director changed, and so now it's Dave. And so um, the very first communication I had with Hanover Tavern was, "There are no such thing as ghosts. There are no ghosts here.
Uh,
Thanks, but no." And
yeah.
so it's funny because like a year or two later, here we are full circle, and now instead of me reaching out to the tavern, uh, uh, the tavern is reaching out to us. Um, so through a lot of volunteering and whatnot, I ended up on their board of directors. Um, and at some point, they asked me to be a president, the president of the board, for better or worse. And I am now on year 3 of being the president of the Hanover Tavern Foundation.
Wow.
Um,
Very nice.
Thank you. And I see, thank you for sharing the Hanover Tavern link out. So, the Hanover Tavern is one of the oldest continuous operating taverns in America. We are in Hanover County, Virginia. And it is the earliest portion of the current building dates back to 1791. The
Oh,
original building dates back to 1733, and saw, history from the Revolutionary War. In fact, being one of the sparks of the Revolutionary War. We had Patrick Henry there and Sarah Shelton and that whole family. So if you're familiar with Sarah's kind of story, um, that a good portion of that occurred there. And right across the street is the historic courthouse that we investigate, and that is where Patrick Henry argued the Parsons cause, which is taxation without representation, which is one of the sparks to the American Revolution. We've also got lots of Civil War activity in the area. We know that there were encampments there, a number of very notable figures such as George Washington, Rochambeau, Lafayette. Um, uh,
Oh,
huh?
oh,
Yep, Edgar Allan Poe, and even P.T. Barnum stayed a night
nice.
at the tavern. So, it's a really, really, really cool place. I absolutely love it. Um, and I know that I biasly have to love it, but I do actually love it. Like it's my historic home that I'll never have, right? Because they are black holes. They're financial black holes. There's
Is it
there's
a
always something.
business now? Is it like a bar or restaurant or anything? How does it run? What's it run
Yeah.
at?
So we are a nonprofit. It's a 501c3, right? And so we're a multifaceted facility. First and foremost, we are a community center, and we have kind of um, a different approach to history. Instead of like having things encased in glass and all these signs, that you can't go there, you can't touch this, eyes only kind of deal. Um, One of the big things that we did is the Hanover Tavern was a tavern, which means that it did serve alcohol, and not only could you stay the night, but you could get food, you could get drink, and so we
Yeah.
actually have the original cage bar from that time period, and so we were able to restore that. Um, and we were able to bring that back to life, reinterpret it. And so now you can actually walk in there. You can sit down in chairs that are from the 1840s or
Oh
1830s.
wow.
You can sit at a recreated tavern table. You can check out the games that they would have played when they were, in there drinking and dining. Um, and we tried to make it in such a way that you are immersed in history. So, the very first thing is we're a museum, right? We're a place to teach history and hope, give people an opportunity to learn. We also have a restaurant. So we have a full restaurant and bar that is in the building in the tavern. And so that's the Hanover Tavern Restaurant and Pub. And that the foundation owns it. It is its own entity. It was actually donated to us a number of years back. We
So
originally
it's the restaurant's not nonprofit. It's
It is for
run by,
profit. It's a restaurant, right?
okay.
And so what happens is they pay rent to the
Gotcha.
foundation.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it originally was something that the restaurant was separate. It was separately owned and operated. And then those folks that owned and operated it over time just were done. They wanted to retire. They wanted to get out of business. And so they proposed the option for the foundation to take on the restaurant and gave it to us in full. All of the furnishings, all of the equipment,
Wow.
everything would be yours, right? They're just handing it over.
Full
Um,
turnkey operation.
yep. And so we weighed out the options and we ended up taking it on. And so now you know we're kind of once again a true tavern, right? The only thing you can't do is you can't stay the night. Um, so we've got that. We also have a theater in the building, and that is um, what is it, a round theater, whatever, I don't remember the term of it, but there's seating on three sides of the theater, like of the
Yeah.
stage. I can't remember the term, but um it's a theater that sits about 150 people. And in the 1950s we had a group from New York called the Barksdale Theater Troupe come down. They found the building. It was um kind of on its last legs at that time. It had lived multiple lives, right? It was a tavern. At one time, it was a boutique hotel. I mean, it had so many different things. It was a post office, um,
Oh,
and so they came in and they were looking for a location that they wanted to turn into the very first dinner and theater.
wow.
And so Hanover County Hanover Tavern was the very first dinner and a show.
Very
Um,
cool.
and so with that, we still have theatrical performances. We have about 3 or 4 a year. And the same exact troupe, they merged with a few different companies. Today, they're the Virginia Repertory Theater.
Oh,
But it is the same group. It is the same group that came in and
that,
started the
wow.
Barksdale Theater. They are still there, still putting on performances to this
That's
day.
quite a legacy.
Yeah.
I've
So
got a
so we've
question
got a full
about
theater.
preservation and being in an historical building. Did you have to work with historical preservation committees and things on the work that you did to keep it, correct and all that stuff? I mean, did you get
Yes.
it put on the historical registry,
Yep.
get the plaque and everything? That's a lot of paperwork.
It is. And that was done before my time.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
the nonprofit um, was founded. They purchased the building in 1990. And so I was at the very old age of 1. Um, and so I was not there for that. But they ran a very big campaign, pulled in, a couple $1 million, and they utilized that for the renovations. Um,
Nice.
Once they, finished up a lot of the renovations to get it just structurally sound, that's when, we applied for our historical status. When you do that, and Amanda, you probably know very, very full well on that, that comes with a huge amount of stipulations of what you can and cannot do, when you
Yeah.
cannot do it, how you cannot do it and can't do it, and just tons of things that if you don't follow that rule, that subset of laws and abide by that, then you lose that status.
Mhm.
So we have to be very, very careful and particular in who we bring in as contractors, right? One of the things that we needed to do was we needed to realign our chimneys a couple years back, and it couldn't just be any masonry company. We had to get a very specific company that knew how to handle. We have, the bricks and the mortar that we use, that was originally used, is not the same that is today,
Yeah.
right? So it's different. We had to make sure that that was right so that it wouldn't erode. We had to make sure that they knew how to handle, um, you know, that type of construction, that build. I mean, it's down to the most minute things of paint too. You can't just go to the store and grab a bucket of paint
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
paint a room. Um, we had to again find the right company to make sure that it would kind of align with, not only what the historical building, but also for the historical status of it. Amanda said yes. Fairy Plantation had to replace half the wood floors in the library. Half the floor cost the house 12 grand. Yep. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's very expensive. I mean, when you're
Mhm.
talking about historic preservation, it's not as simple as like, oh well, we got to paint this room or we got to replace the carpet or something. No,
Oh,
let's just do it. Um, no, man, it is a lot, and if you're going to get it done right, you need to find the right people, you need to find the right materials, and typically that's very, very expensive.
that's why we've
Um,
lost so many places that have just fallen into ruin because people don't have that kind of money. We'd
Mhm.
love to preserve so many buildings, but who's got the cash?
Yep, and it's rough, man, because even some of the counties, I know in Hanover County a couple years back we lost a historical property that was pre-Civil War,
Oh, yeah.
1818, and that is quite a time. Like that is a huge length of time, and stood for just shy of 200 years, and it was destroyed in um, half a day.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Yep. So, yeah, I mean, it says shutters had to be repainted. The color had to be approved. Limited contractors, limited materials. 100%. Christy, who works with Fleetwood Church, same thing. She knows very well. They had to get a company out there to replace the shingles, and it had to be a very particular shingle. It had to be very, very down to the last minute detail, to make sure that it was correct. I see Lori. Hi, Lori. Lori works with us at the tavern.
Well, the
Um,
problem is with the companies that are allowed to do these things are so limited. They charge whatever the heck they want because they know they're, your captured audience. So that's
they
limited.
can. I mean, one of the things that we did, and this is, again, for some of you guys that do have nonprofit locations or are working with a historic location, keep in mind that some of these places may want to sponsor you. And in that case, I mean, this is the same thing with the tavern when we had somebody come in and do all of our painting. We had exterior painting done, interior painting done. We had to get the roof, fixed up and whatnot. Um, all of those companies worked with us so that they could be sponsorships, and what that meant is
Nice.
they gave us a pretty significant discount.
And just
Um,
promote their business through your business. That's
Mhm.
great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so they got to promote that, hey, we are the chosen company to do X at the Hanover
Yeah.
Tavern. We are the chosen company to do X at Ferry. And so that gave them the ability to go out and advertise that. And it gave us the ability to not have to pay so much, which was great.
Very smart move. Good idea. Got any questions, Heather?
Not yet. I just know a lot of people are probably waiting to get to the logistics on hosting an event
Yeah.
because I know my first event was trial and error as well. And with our event, I know the worst part was the ghost didn't cooperate.
Well, that happens
Yeah.
though, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so kind of getting back into hosting an event, right? Let's make a sharp turn here. One of the reasons that let me preface this: hosting an event is not for everybody. Um, your first goal as a paranormal team should not be um, go out and host an event. Your first goal as a paranormal team should not be go out and buy merch and everybody
Mhm.
looks like twins on the team, right? It is the first thing is lay your groundwork, lay your foundation, right? You need to build your team like you would build a house. And
Mhm.
if you don't take the time at the beginning, you're going to have to find time later, and it's going to be so much harder because at that point you're already flying a plane that's missing a wing, and now you want to add that extra wing back on, right? So, the very first thing is get the right people, get people that you can trust, get people and know that know your mission, know your goal. you know One of the things that Transcend does is when we host events, 100% of the proceeds goes directly to the location. um and we do that again as a way to give back to the community, because it's not just about us, right? Like we're able to do our research and move forward our research and investigate, but these locations are for everybody, right? Like we are just stewards. The tavern is going to be there, hopefully, knock on wood, um, you know, well after I'm gone and buried, right? And that's what I want. Like I want to be a good steward so that it can be there for people to enjoy and learn from, for time memoriam. So, you know, make sure that whatever your reason for doing it is a good reason. Now, I do work with folks that also are event company. They make money off of it. And I don't have any problem with that, so long as you're clear and on the up and up and you're upfront about this, right? What really bothers me is when you kind of get into these gray areas where you kind of skim a little bit off the top, and you're like, nobody's going to notice or care. You should be very clear about that, right? Clear about your intentions, clear about how you're operating, what your mission is, and what your goal is, how you are going to play in the arena, right? In the paranormal events arena, because there's a lot of people in it, right? Um, so make sure that you take the time to get your team together. And keep in mind that hosting an event is not the same as investigating. I know a lot of people hate to hear that, but it's true, right? Hosting an event is um, helping others experience something. It's not about you. It's not about your equipment. It's not about you collecting data. Um, it's about the guests. They paid to be there. This is their experience, you know, and you need to make sure that you plan for that. One of the first things that we found as a team when hosting these events is not everybody's a people person, and you can't expect that, right? You can't expect everybody to be extroverted or willing enough to get in front of a group of people and talk and entertain, right?
Yeah.
Heather, you had just mentioned the fact that when you guys had your event, the ghosts weren't necessarily cooperating.
Mhm.
So, what do you do in that aspect? Do you just sit there and stare at your guests, or do you
No.
find a way to make sure that people are still having a good time, right?
Yeah.
I make sure my guests are very uncomfortable with me.
Mhm.
I just stare whole right into their head.
Chris starts taking his clothes off, and that's how he makes money. Put the money, put the clothes back on for a couple
Exactly.
bucks.
Yeah,
My
what we
dogs
ended up
crush
doing
that.
during that event, though, is because we've had experiences there and we knew it was very active, we ended up taking the group on a tour, explaining this is what happened here. This is, and these people experienced it, and then they had a train from Area 51. So we kind of had fun playing with that and talking about the stories behind that, and then that got them to book the tour again because we said ghosts don't act on command, and when
Yeah.
they came back the next time, we couldn't get them to shut up.
Yep. And that's important, right? Like if you are a legit and on the up and up. Oh, look at Thomas says, "Woo!" If if you are on the up and up, and like you know, it's like the weather. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it pours, and sometimes it's just a boring day, right? Like,
So on our ticket on Eventbrite for our upcoming event, we have that we cannot guarantee paranormal activity will happen, but we do have a huge amount of evidence of paranormal activity from this location. But
Yep.
regardless, you're going to have a good time, and we have a lot of things planned for you that'd be a great evening. So we, preface by saying we can't promise a ghost is going to show up, but you're going to have a good time regardless.
yes.
One
And
of
so
the-
that's go ahead, Chris.
One of the main things that I always tell my guests is, when you do investigating, paranormal investigating is a lot like fishing. You go out there wanting to catch a fish, and when it happens, you're hooked. And
Yeah.
if you don't, it is what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, Amanda says can't guarantee activity, but can promise a good night.
Mhm.
Gee, Amanda's like winking at that too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kidding, Amanda. But yeah, man. So your guests, and we always preface every investigation the very same way that you do, Philip. Like, we're not guaranteeing everything. We're not here to like massage the truth. Like, this is it. What you're getting is the real deal. This is not television. I mean, when we film for the Ghost Finders and every other major TV show, when they're filming, they're probably there for a weekend. Some shows are there for a week at a location. And then what they're doing is they're taking all of the experience that they had all over that entire time and crunching it down to 1 hour. And not just 1 hour, it's 1 hour with ads and commercials, right? So you get like 30, 45 minutes of actual things.
There's one of the big shows I know for a fact that they send an advance team down long before they show up, and they're filming and gathering evidence, and then the stars show up and plop in, and then they put it all together. So
Exactly. And so I always try to tell my guests, like, keep that in mind. Like, this is real. This is not television. Things, you're going to see a condensed version of a weekend, a condensed version of a week. And so that's one of the big things is your guests are your priority on these investigations, on these events, not your investigation itself, right? You need to make sure that your hold on 1 second.
leaving you on a cliffhanger.
yeah, that's true, Thomas. That's good.
I'm sorry, I distracted him by putting the comment up. Sorry.
Sorry. Sorry. Anyways, I had somebody thinking.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you keep your guests at the forefront of this. And
Uh,
what I mean by that is sometimes, oh, hi, Phyllis. Phyllis just messaged. She said she's watching. She says hi. So you need to make sure that your guests are at the forefront of this. You need to make sure that the investigators that you partner them with are going to be able to handle that. That's a lot of pressure. It's not the same as investigating, because now you're kind of like helping others try to experience something, and if you're not, then you need to be able to pivot and share something, share some history, share some knowledge, share some of your experiences. We found very quickly that not everybody likes that. And so when I started partnering some of my investigators with groups, and then they would just kind of like sit there and stare into the abyss for an hour, and nothing was happening, and it's just dead quiet, and people are falling asleep, like, well, maybe we need to change how that works, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the big things is I'm making sure that I know the strengths and weaknesses of your team, so that you're aware. Yes, I can put them in front of people. Yes, they're going to be able to communicate with folks. There's nothing wrong with being an introvert. I mean, shit, I'm actually introverted, right? But you need to make sure that those folks are comfortable with it. You cannot throw somebody into the fire like that and say, okay, now you need to lead this group of people you've never met and
exactly.
make sure they have a good time. So that's the biggest thing. Lay the foundation. Make sure you have the right folks. Make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. And then we kind of get into the whole rigmarole of the event itself, and that's the big part.
Yeah, something that well, I met with Chris and Steve, I don't know what, almost 2 months ago, and they helped advise me on how to put on the event that we're going to do. And the information was invaluable. And I think you need to do a whole presentation on just what you did for us, because he basically handed us what to do, and then we've tweaked it, and I was concerned about sitting there and like nothing happening. So we've devised this plan. The location where we're at is 3 separate buildings that we're going to rotate the groups, but each location has specific investigating techniques
Mm-hmm.
for the leads to do, so that there's always something else they can do if something's not working. And
Yes.
each place has specific equipment that we're going to put in that they can teach and talk about. So each location has specific things that can be going on. And also we're going to ask, the people, the guests, like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Which one would you like to try? We're going to keep it interactive, but don't want anyone sitting there just staring at each other. That's our biggest fear.
Yep.
So we thought if we have things planned out for each location, that there's something to do. There's something for the leads to go, okay, well, let's try this EVP session, and we're having the questions printed out and laminated that are specific to each building with names, and we're going to let the guests read the EVP questions, and teach them how to do it. We're going to have things for them to actually do and participate in.
Yeah.
They're waiting for the REM pod to go off.
Yeah, it's kind of like set yourself up for success, right? And so one of the first things that we found is, how do you pivot quickly if you walk into a location? The very first thing you try to do is maybe a burst EVP session, and you get nothing. How do you pivot? How do you change that up, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think I shared this with you. We devised a subset of, okay, when you get into the location, here's a few things that you can try right off the bat. You can try a burst EVP session.
Yeah.
You can go Internet Estes method. Some people hate it, but you could do a light, a flashlight session.
Yeah.
And so we built this out. Now we don't have a list anymore because we've been doing it for quite some time. And so, but it's one of those things that's ingrained. It's like, okay, this didn't work. I'm gonna move. Chris loves to do damn cat balls, right? And so Chris
Spirit
loves
balls.
cat balls.
I love
Spirit balls. They are spirit balls, everyone.
Not when you get them from PetSmart, okay?
Hey, Amazon, all right.
Amazon.
Yeah. Great for cats. I mean, ghost investigating.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm not trying to knock them. I just hate that they're cat balls. Have a plan. Have a plan. Have a plan A. Have a plan B. Have a plan C. Make sure that when you get into this spot, you're not going to stand there and like fish out of the water, just kind of swim around. Another thing that I think is important is knowing the history of the location. If you can't even answer when the building was built or why, what's the most known, kind of facts. I'm not saying get to know every little thing. We tend to do that with our locations, but we also spend a lot of time at our locations. So, at least have something that you can share some history, share some knowledge, drop a knowledge bomb on them, right? Like give them something that you can work with and you can ask questions and you can get involved. There's Thomas says meow. That's for you, Chris. Get something like make sure that you are preparing yourself accordingly. You don't want to walk in there and have no idea what to do, right? Exactly. One of the things that we set up when we're doing these events is we always have 2 leads per group. And I do that for a few reasons. First off, I have those 2 people are able to depend on each other, right?
Yeah.
It's also going to be a long night. There are some nights where you get groups of people that will not talk. They will sit there and watch you from start to finish. And that is exhausting, right? Because you can't sit there and act yourself, right? You've got to act professional. You are an ambassador to that location. At that point in time, these folks see you as the ambassador. They see you as Leland says ugh. I'm sorry, Leland. I hope I didn't upset you. You are the ambassador. You are the face of that location, and you need to make sure that you honor that and you respect that and you put in your due diligence. Mm-hmm. So, I have 2 leads per group. That way, if let's say it's a 4-hour event, maybe one leads for 2 hours and the other one is the cat herder. I call it the cat herding because it's the tail end of making sure that everybody is moving from spot to spot. You don't have anybody kind of wandering off over here, squirreling away over there, as we call it. Leland says no. I've had a few groups. Yes, exactly, and it's so difficult. And so, we have that all the time where we have people just kind of like roam off over there, and the next thing you know, they're like, where did they go? Right. So we have the cat herder. Um,
Yeah.
and we flip it up. So like if Chris is leading a group and maybe it's Chris and Tiffany, one of my other teammates, you know, Chris might lead the first two locations or the first two stops, or maybe he will lead one, and then he will make sure at the end of he stays at the end of the group, make sure he gets a head count and moves everybody to the next. Then Tiffany will lead the next location, the next spot, and then Chris will lead the next one, and they just kind of rotate. That way nobody gets tired of
Yeah.
sitting there asking question after question after question, or thinking up different ideas or things to try or things to say, things to do. Um, so we try to make sure that we don't want to burn anybody out in this. It's a volunteer thing. Nobody gets paid for it, so make sure everybody's having fun. And I feel like the best way to do that is to make sure that not only is your guests but your leads are too. Give them an opportunity to breathe. Um,
And
the
you're
other
Also,
thing.
if somebody needs to leave early,
Mhm.
if you got two leads, one can escort the other one out. Like the property we're going to be at, we're locking, it's all gated. The entire property is fenced and gated and will have to be taken out. Or let's say you need to change batteries on a piece of equipment. If you got two there, one can continue the investigating and the other one can fix equipment. So, I mean, there's so
Yes.
many reasons you want two per
Mhm.
And
group.
those are big things. I mean, when you're planning these investigations, you want to make sure people are not just like floating away. Like if you have somebody that needs to go to the bathroom, and typically if you're at a historical site, those bathrooms are far and few between. You might
Yeah.
have one, right? And in some of those locations, they're a next building over kind of deal.
Yeah.
And so you don't want your guests just rolling off, doing their own thing, right? Because not only may they get lost, but they might be interrupting the other group that's there
Uh-huh.
investigating, right? The other people. Um, and like you said, if people need to leave early, if you need to take somebody back because they want to grab a snack or something like that, if they want to grab a smoke, and also if they get hurt. And that is the big thing for us is if somebody gets hurt, somebody needs to leave. Um, and we've had it where we've done battlefields, and there was a girl that um, she ended up falling and she hit her head on the pavement. She needed to go to the hospital and she ended up getting stitches, right? um, the way that we set it up is so that there are two leads for each group. And what I was able to do is, I think Chris, you were there for that, weren't you?
for which one?
Cold Harbor.
No, that was BC.
That was BCG's.
That was
um,
BC.
so um, so I had one of my leads stay with me. The other lead took the rest of the group, and they continued the investigation because you don't need 12 people standing there while you're trying to help somebody, right? Like they can keep moving and investigate. And then I also have, myself. I typically don't set myself in a group for a few reasons. First off, making sure if anybody gets hurt, I am available immediately to go and help that person. And in this case, I, especially with the longer investigations or bigger locations that require a lot of walking, um, we make sure that we have multiple. And so I was able to grab my lead. I had myself, and then I had two other, I call them floaters, like toilet
Yeah.
terms. I don't have a better term, so I'm sorry. It's potty humor, but they're floaters. And so it was the four of us, and we were able to, you know, very quickly react and handle the situation appropriately so that she could get to the hospital, and get what she needed, right? And that's very important. You need to be able and you need to be aware that this is going to happen. It's very far and few between. We've had medical incidents twice in all of the years that we've been hosting. But you need to make sure that you prepare for it, that you're ready for it, and you hold the safety of your guests in your hand in that in that
That brings us to the topic of liability waivers,
yes.
which are
And so one of the
extremely
big
important.
things, yep, one of the big things we do is, every single person that comes to the investigation signs a waiver.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just include the guests, it includes your team as well. You need to make sure that you have a waiver that it's covering your liability for your team. It's covering it for the location. It's covering it for any volunteers,
Yes.
any officers of that, if it's a foundation or an organization, a nonprofit, that it covers all of that, right? Luckily, in the way that we've handled these things, we haven't had anybody that wanted to, kind of go back and sue the location.
Yeah.
And the way that we handle this is because Transcend is operating as basically volunteers, right? We are volunteers at that point. So our team falls under the insurance policy of the historic location of the nonprofit as volunteers. So we sign waivers, and that means that we fall under that umbrella. Um, you need to make sure that the location does have insurance or maybe boosts their insurance for that evening, um, for all of these folks that are going to be there. I don't have that process like defined out, but if you talk to the location, typically they know how to handle that. They probably have an insurance agent that handles that for them, and knows the steps and can make sure that they have the insurance that they need for this event. Because the last thing you want to do is get caught with your pants down, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to turn a fundraising opportunity into a fund losing opportunity. I've seen it happen, and you just need to make sure, it's not something to be scared of. You just need to make sure that you're doing your due diligence ahead of time. I'm not talking about, everybody sign this piece of paper. It doesn't say anything on it, but this means, you're not keeping us liable. Like,
Yeah.
these are things that you need to do before you even consider hosting an event.
Yeah.
Make sure you have a waiver. Make sure you have it reviewed by a lawyer, and make sure that it's going to cover your tail and everybody else's tail.
And something that you said, I believe it was you, that should you need to call an ambulance or medical services, that they have to pay for it. The person that it's being used on has to pay for the ambulance. That you're not going to get stuck paying for the ambulance because you called 911.
Yeah,
And we've
I mean,
got that incorporated into our
yeah,
our waiver.
the guest assumes the full liability of that
Yeah,
of that
exactly.
evening, right? And so luckily we haven't had the need for an ambulance. It's been very minor stuff like sprained ankles. she
Yeah.
she knocked her head. 3 stitches later she was good. So it's been minor stuff, thankfully. But you need to make sure that you're covering your tail, because that's a very real danger,
Yeah.
and that could really be a sink or swim issue for some of these locations. Um, so cross your T's, dot your I's before you start investigating.
I
Make
think we've
sure,
also got, we're not responsible for psychological, emotional, spiritual damages. If you get possessed by a devil, I'm sorry, it's not our fault.
that's yours, not ours.
You deal with it. You signed up for it. Good luck. I mean, think of everything that could possibly go wrong and put it in that waiver.
100%. And so again, just make sure you get it reviewed. Make sure that it's going to be worth its weight, and
Yeah.
not just going to be blow away in the wind. And so we've talked a little bit about a waiver covering your team. We've talked about team management and what that looks like.
Can I interject and just go
Yeah.
back real quick to building teams and team management? Another thing too is when you have 2 team members, make sure they get along with each other. Make sure it's like a yin and yang situation. So if one is more ADHD or ding 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 ding, you have another one that's like, hey, let me pull you back in.
Yeah.
So they kind of work together.
Complement each other's personalities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And one of the things that we do, because not everybody on our team owns equipment, right? And so what we'll do is we take a stock of, okay, what team members have equipment, what team members don't, what team
Inventory.
members are, psychically inclined, and which ones aren't. And so we try to partner it in such a way that we have somebody that might have equipment, and then maybe somebody that is like psychic medium kind of deal, so that our guests can kind of get the best of both worlds in that aspect, right? They get to experience what they want to experience, because at the end of the day, it's all about them. If folks want to, um, I'm science focused, right? So like, folks whip out dowsing rods, or
Yeah.
a a app on their phone, the ghost radar, and they're like, there's an ancient ghost 10 feet ahead on the right, and I'm like, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. But it's about them. Like, it's about the guest, it's about their experience. Don't impose your opinions and your thoughts. Just because dowsing rods don't work for me doesn't mean they don't work for everybody or anybody else.
Sure.
I've seen tons of times when people have used dowsing rods with some really, really cool um, um, parallel collaborating evidence, right? I have seen some really cool stuff. I've seen things where people are using dowsing rods at the same time that we're getting EVPs that
Yeah.
are in line with the questions that are being asked for the dowsing rods.
And it's good to show a variety of investigating techniques, from
Yes.
the high tech things we use to the things that don't need batteries, that you don't have to go out and spend a fortune on. I think it's great to do a mix of those, and explain, yes, this is more scientific, this is subjective, but this is something you can try and experiment with on your own.
Yep. And
Yep.
so, we're not there to rain on somebody's parade,
Mm.
right? Like, I've seen events where people try to shove things down people's
Yeah.
throats, and I'm sorry, it doesn't go that well. So, I don't necessarily agree with like ghost radar stuff, but I'm not going to be like, oh, you're so dumb.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what somebody wants to use, that's what somebody wants to use. That's fine. Um,
At the end of the day, it's their experience, not yours.
yep. Yep. And like we talked about before, it's not an investigation. Like, to be very clear, it's not an investigation. Like, and I say that seriously because, like, when one of the things that we do when we investigate is we go into a location, we set down an audio recorder, and we time and date stamp it. Okay, this is Steve Dills. Time is 10:14 p.m. EST on such and such date. We are at the Hanover Tavern in the parlor, and then I'll say, my name is Steve, and then Chris will say, my name is Chris, and then we go around the room and we have everybody state their names. Right. The more people that you have, the more audio interference you're going to run into. The more demons you are going to record by way of people eating Taco Bell before they arrived, right?
Yeah.
Like, you are going to have stuff on during those events that it's. I've heard some really cool EVPs where, like, without a doubt, that wasn't anybody in that group. But it's also hard to say when you're like, oh, I heard it sounds like a growl, and then somebody's like, yeah, my stomach.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, we kind of have to throw that out at that point, like due diligence.
Mhm.
So the more people you have, the harder it is to say you've got rock solid evidence. So, without something that's really like out there, we typically treat events as events, investigations as investigations, right? We try to investigate at the events, but if people are talking, if people are moving around, or you got somebody over there, like, even though you said leave all your snacks at headquarters, but
Yeah.
somehow they brought a bag of Doritos, like, you can't help that.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. And so you got to keep that in mind.
I want to bring up something for people watching that are thinking about they would like to approach a historical location to perhaps do this. This is something that we did. We did a written proposal to the location, and we put who we are. We put in what we're proposing to do at their location. We put in, what would the event look like? We wrote a description of what it would look like. Then we gave a sample itinerary of what the night would look like. And a copy of, an example of a waiver. We put all this in there and then presented it to the board of trustees of the location.
Mhm.
And that professionalism will get you a long way.
Oh
So
yeah.
if you guys are thinking about wanting to do something like that, go as professional as you can be, and they're going to be more willing and eager to work with you because they know what you're going to do and how well you're going to do it and how organized you're going to be when you do it.
Yep. I mean, they want to, they need to be able to trust you, right? Because
Exactly.
you're going to be there with probably one member of that organization,
Mhm.
and they need to trust that you're going to do it justice.
Mhm.
So I like that idea. We've done that before. We've put together portfolios.
Mhm.
We've been asked to present in front of boards.
Mhm.
How you envision it, and the better, the more that you have up front, and the more questions that you can answer ahead of time, and without them asking those questions, right?
Yeah.
Like what you said, Philip. We we outlined what this evening is going to look like.
Mhm.
We walked them through the evening. That's very important, right? From a business perspective, this is it's hard because people, this is a passion, right? This is a passion project for most of us, right? Like, I don't make money off of this. I don't think any of us make money off of this that I'm aware of. um and so this is it's a passion project, but you are working and interacting with businesses.
Yeah.
Might be a nonprofit, but it's still a business, right? And so it's all about risk and reward. And they want to make sure that what they're doing is not putting them at risk. The more that you treat this as a professional interaction,
Yeah.
and you're not showing up with, ripped jeans and like,
Mhm.
just whatever, but you are professionally approaching these places, professionally saying, this is what we plan to do. This is how it's going to benefit you. This is how, we see this evening going. This is going to be the outcome, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to go a long way and get you a lot farther
Yeah.
than if you just, hey, we want to host an event.
Exactly. And we also, something we tried, we did a partnership agreement. And it's not so much like this big legal contract. It was like, we're going to do this, this, and this, but we need you to promise us you're going to have the parking lot signs out to show where the parking lot is. We're going to need you to open the gate when someone needs to leave. Specific things. You need to have the bathrooms cleaned and ready for that evening. There's a couple places that we're going to need chairs, and that's their responsibility to make sure the chairs are there for us. Just little things that we don't have time to do that's specifically related to them working at that location. And just everybody's clear on what we need and what they need and how we're going to work together and do it. And I tell you, that's really helped a lot.
Yep.
We go over it. We go over the location and the floor plans. Like, hey, we need these chairs in the front room at this table because we're going to do such and such experiment. Lay it all out so there's no question and everybody on your team is comfortable and never at a loss. Like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing or where I'm supposed to be, because that's going to show. Your guests are going to see that if your team's not comfortable, and
And
you don't want that.
that's with
Yes.
anything in life. With teamwork and open communication,
Yeah.
like everything works.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like the two key features of life.
And
Write
money.
that down, kid. Money.
But yeah, I mean, it's important. Like, so, like you said, having a clear line of communication is going to be key. Like, if you don't have that, you don't have anything.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of goes back to making sure you have the right people in the right spots, right? You might have a team leader that is doing a great job, but maybe they're not necessarily the best at communicating or
Mm-hmm.
conveying some of those things. Might work for your team, but make sure you get the right folks into those spots. Like, we struggled at the very beginning of forming this team with titles and giving people titles.
Oh yeah.
And this person's the case manager, this person's a team lead, this person's a lead investigator. And it's stupid. I hate titles. I can't stand them because it creates this almost like an inferiority complex amongst people. It builds gaps instead of bridges. And so we have very little titles. I'm the director. That's it. We've got, I'm not the leader. I'm the director. I kind of direct us in the right
Yeah.
spaces, but I am not the end all be all. We have 18 people, I think, on our team, Chris. Um, and yeah, we don't even know. We have a lot of folks. We have a very big team, but every single person has a say in what we do. If we
Hmm.
bring on a new member, it's
Yeah.
every person has the ability to vote, and it's got to be a unanimous vote.
Hmm.
Um, every single person on the team can lead an investigation, can lead an
Yeah.
event. This weekend I have to travel up to the Rochester Paracon, and Chris is going to be, running the investigation along with Tiffany and some of my, the other folks on the team, and they're going to run the investigation, the event from start to finish. And you know, if you enable your team and you enable the people around you, um, then you guarantee yourself a successful outcome. Like there are times where I'm going to be sick. There are times where I can't make it because I've got prior obligations. That shouldn't be a showstopper. That should not be a showstopper for your team. If it is, that is a gap, right? You got to resolve that. There's investigations I haven't been on. Does that mean that like the team can't investigate? Like that's silly, right? Like why am I holding everybody back? So, you know, everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows that, they can play every role. They can play the role of the person floating. They can play the role of the person that's leading the event for the evening. They can play the role of the person that is checking in the guests at the
Hmm.
beginning. Maybe the role of, leading a group or, cat herding, like all of
Yeah.
these things. You can, if you can seamlessly rotate your team through it, everybody knows what the goal is. Everybody knows those roles. You are off to a much better start than if you're kind of like almost pigeonholing yourself, and just it doesn't work. It does not work.
And that goes for just regular, investigations. Everyone on the team, on my team, I want them to know how to put the DVR system together. I don't want the same people doing it all the time, which, usually roles kind of fall into place, but there are no titles because some enjoy doing things more than others. But I want everyone to know how to put those cameras up, how to get that DVR going, how everything works, how to do baseline, everyone needs to know how to do everything. So no one, if someone like you said can't be there, there's not a role not being filled. I mean, because that puts you at a huge disadvantage. So if everybody's trained in everything, doesn't mean you like doing those specific things, but at least you need to know how to do them.
Everybody knows how to set up a DVR. They just don't know how to break it down.
Uh, how to wind the cables correctly.
Like,
Yeah, that's usually like, oh my god.
I've seen, yeah, like there's so many times that we set up the DVR and then like, you're getting towards the end of the night and then people just mysteriously start dipping one after the other. And they're like, "Well, I've got to go. I got to work in the morning." And then it's just like
Oh,
Chris and I, and we're like, "All right, well, we've got to break down an 8 camera DVR by ourselves now." Like that's fun. Uh, but
I would not be. That would not be happening. Nope, you're there when we start. You're there when we pull out of the driveway.
Phew. so so yeah. So I mean, we've talked about waivers a little bit. We've talked about team dynamics, how that's going to work. When it gets to like, okay, you guys have decided now you want to host an event. You really want to do it. You want to take on the fun responsibility. Um, how do you handle that? So, you've partnered up with a historic location. You guys are at a common ground where you're going to work together. Um, Again, this really is a big thing around how your group is working. If you're sharing proceeds in some form or fashion, if 100% of the proceeds is going to the location, what have you, that is going to kind of dictate the next step, which is how do people purchase tickets. Um, I will say that we have used everything from Ticket Leap to Eventbrite to Go Passage. We've used Thriller Events. We've used a whole slew of different things. One of the things that I would suggest is please, please, please use a ticketing platform. Um, I have seen where, you know, and again, I'm not dogging anybody, but I've seen it where sometimes people utilize PayPal and it's like a personal PayPal and it's like send me the money to my PayPal account and that means you have a ticket, right? Um, I find a lot of issue around the financial tracking of that, right? Um, Especially from my perspective, where our team makes $0 and 0 cents, and I don't want the IRS or anybody coming after me saying, "Well, you made this money because." All of this went into your PayPal account, your personal
Yeah.
PayPal account. We see this money, we see this $1,000, $2,000 coming in. Um, and granted, you spent it, you gave it to the location, but you are setting yourself up for some risk there, right? And so one of the big things is, you know, for us it's easy because 100% of the proceeds goes to the location. So we work with them to set up an Eventbrite. We work with them to set up, a Thriller Events or Go Passage or whatever it is. If you have a location that's not aware of those sorts of things, you can set it up for them and then just deposit it to their bank account. If it's small enough, events where it's not a lot of money coming in, you could have it, go from your ticketing platform to your bank account and then cut a check. But make sure that you know what the tax laws are in your state so that you aren't bringing in so much, even though you are turning around and donating it all. Make sure you are not setting yourself up so that that looks like income because you will be taxed on it and you will have to report it. So you need to be careful on that one. Um, like I said, we work with it so that the money goes directly to the location. Hands are clean. We don't touch a dime, right? And that makes my life a lot easier, and it makes me a lot less gray hair. Um, so we do that. We in terms of ticket pricing, I've seen tickets anywhere from like $10, which I think is crazy, to $500, which I also think is crazy. I think your time is valuable, and time is money, right? Time is the only thing that we can never get back. And so if you are there leading somebody through an experience, that is valuable. That is valuable. Like we shouldn't pretend that that's not a valuable piece of this. And so typically what I look at when I'm looking at building out ticket pricing is anywhere between 10 to roughly, $14, $15, depending on the location, the size of the location, the amount of time that you are going to be there, $10 to $15 per hour per person of investigating. Keep in mind, I say of investigating. There is sometimes I've seen events where it takes an hour from the moment that guests step foot onto the property until you start investigating. And I think that that's a shame if people are paying for that, right? Because they're paying, whatever the price is to sit around. And you might use that time for good reasons. Like during that time, we will go over our rules for the road. I have a spiel that I give every time, right? Um, and Philip, you and I talked about this, and Chris, but I don't want to charge people for listening to me, you know and we also have a representative from that historical location give some history. I'm not saying a full hour's worth, but a brief 15 minutes. Talk about the history, the key bits that people can use going into the location, and then also to advertise what upcoming events that they have, right? The paranormal is not the only thing. This might be a foot in the door for some of these folks, but the idea is to get these people to be, so passionate about the location that they want to come back for more things, right? The tavern's a perfect example because not only do we host paranormal investigations, but a lot of the folks that have come to those have also ended up coming to the plays, or they come to a tavern tea, or they come to one of our tap takeovers where we have different breweries come in, right? Um,
If I had a nickel for every single time that I heard, "Oh, I didn't know y'all were a restaurant,"
yeah,
Yeah.
be
yes.
rich.
So give the location an opportunity to flaunt it a little bit. You know what I mean? Um, but I keep that in mind, and so the first hour is typically going to be letting people get there because I tell you what, people never get there on time. And if you are hosting an investigation where you start at one location and you investigate it, and then maybe halfway through the night you need to drive 20 minutes down the road to investigation location B, um, I I have never had an investigation where if we're doing that, everybody shows up to the right place. I always have 1 to 2 people that religiously will show up to location B. Um, and that's even when, I've sent out a communication, and in big red bold letters at the very top it says we are starting at the Hanover Tavern, and people always show up at another location, and they're like, "Where is everybody?" And I'm like, "Well, this is why the email says this." Um, so I give myself time at the beginning that people can arrive late, because they will, um, and enough time that you can go over the rules of the road for the evening, right? So give yourself about an hour ahead of time. Then you get into the investigation. Um, in terms of time management, there, um, you know, really, you need to know the location. You need to be able to walk it. You need to be able to feel it out. You need to know what you're working with. There are some places at the tavern, the coach house, or excuse me, the courthouse, for example, that are very hit or miss. Either the activity is popping or it is absolutely dead,
Uh-huh.
pun intended. Like, it is like you could take a nap and you'd be fine, right? And so, like, do people want to spend an hour in that spot? Probably not. They're going to be bored out of their mind. It's one big room, right? So, like, you need to be aware of, and you need to keep in consideration the environment around you. So when we host events, we're typically looking at 45 minutes per spot. If it's a bigger location, maybe it might be an hour, but that also means that there's more space for people to move. They're not going to be confined to one hallway or one room, that sort of thing. Um, and so then, we might rotate to 4 different spots in that evening. And when I say rotate, I mean, we pick out 4 spots. What are our 4 big spots? And at the tavern, for example, it's the Hanover Tavern. They get the whole building for an hour. Then they go to the courthouse for probably like 45 minutes or so. They go to the jail for about 45 minutes or so. And then they go to the historic clerk of courts or the library for 45 minutes or so. Those other 3 locations are much smaller than the tavern. And there's a lot less to explore. And so, like, people just don't want to be confined to small spaces with a bunch of folks. Um, so you need to make sure you manage your time appropriately. Make sure that you keep in consideration that people need to walk from spot to spot, right? And so everybody has different paces for walking, as well as the fact that you will have folks that have disabilities. And that is a very, very important thing. If you have a location, for example, the tavern, we have an elevator outside so that folks can go from one floor to the next. However, it doesn't go all the way up to the second floor. It goes from the basement to the first floor, and that's it. And so you need to keep that in mind. Like, if you have somebody that's wheelchair bound, that you make sure that folks are aware, hey, we're going to be walking from location to location, or there is some accessibility here. You can, if you are wheelchair bound, or you have some sort of disability, you cannot walk for long periods of time. Make sure you take that into consideration for your guests, so that they aren't having a horrible experience because of what you're making them go through, right? um what else?
To add on to like walking and all that fun jazz. Another thing too is logistically, you need to realize, like, for the tavern, for example, like Talladega is like right behind the tavern, and people on that road do not slow down. So when they're going mock Jesus, you need to be able to like see that and be the person to flag them down to stop, so that all your people can cross, and that nobody's trying to cross when you got someone that should be going 35 is going 80 through.
hmm And so, like, to Chris's point, some of the locations are across the street for us. And so, we make sure that there is a level of safety there, right? Some of our bigger events, there's a nonprofit crossing guard that's in the area. It's volunteer based, but they will come out. and typically all of the volunteers are retired police officers, and they will come out and they will help folks safely get across the street, so that we don't add to our spirit count for the evening. Um, I don't want that on my watch.
Yeah, one
So
quick thing though, we did tell our guests when we had them, tell them not to wear open-toed shoes or high heels
mhm.
Yeah.
because we actually had someone show up in flip-flops.
Yeah, and I mean that's important, right? Like if part of your location is outdoors, you probably don't, necessarily want flip flops. I know, like one of the locations I investigated, I got attacked by a massive amount of ants.
Oh,
Um, Chris was there for that one, and it would have been so much worse if I had shorts on, but I had like, if I had like flip flops on, that would have sucked. And so it's important to know, like, to communicate to your guests, hey, if you're investigating multiple buildings, like I think Philip, you said your location has multiple buildings, right?
mhm.
They're going to be walking outside. What does that mean?
We
Does
put
that
that
mean
on the Eventbrite rules.
perfect?
Please do not wear open-toed shoes or flip-flops because we will be walking outside from location to location, and for safety reasons,
Yep.
dress appropriately.
And so like we make sure that folks are aware of that. You want to make sure that your guests are aware of that. Like, do they need to bring a jacket?
Mhm.
Are some of the locations, do they have power? Do they have heat? And so like
You need
while
a flashlight. Bring a flashlight. Yeah.
Yeah. And so make sure that your guests are prepared as much as you are. You have much more experience at that location. One of the big things that I would recommend is investigating first, getting to know the lay of the land before you host an event
Really.
there. Um, but you have that experience. You need to make sure that you are a good steward and you are a good host. And that means making sure that you're setting up your guests properly. If they need to bring a jacket, if they should be wearing, a proper footwear, if it's going to be ridiculously hot or ridiculously cold, you know, make sure that they know how to handle that appropriately.
Prohibiting
Um,
like drugs and alcohol as well.
Yep. We have
yep.
that listed. We're going to do a dress rehearsal for our event, which so everyone's going to walk through the paces from guests arriving, which will be a couple of volunteers. We're going to just do a run through of the whole evening on an afternoon, not a nighttime thing, just so everyone is in the groove for when we do it the next weekend.
Hmm.
I think once you do it, you're gonna like feel it. You're gonna feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's gonna be very like comfortable, and it's gonna be like
yeah,
a flow of emotion. And then after that, you're like, oh, I got
yeah.
this.
Get through the first one, learn what worked, what didn't work. What we're going to do is like all these things we've got lined up. We may be erasing some of them for the next time, but let's see what works and what doesn't work.
Progressional growth.
Yep.
Mhm.
Hi, Virgil. Virgil says, "Hey from Manchester, England." That's pretty cool. Um, Thank you for joining us.
Chester, what time is it there? What, like 7, 8 hours?
I don't know. It's a good question. Um, but yeah. So and part of that is the spiel. I have a whole spiel. Clayton, we are talking about how to host, and kind of like getting yourself and your team ready to host a paranormal investigation, a paranormal event. Um, so we talked a little bit about money, right? Like I said, it really depends on location and how big or small, or and sometimes you don't set that. Sometimes I recommend that, for the historical location, I might say, hey, this is kind of where we land. From a recommendation standpoint, we typically do anywhere from 10 to 15 bucks. What I don't like seeing is some of these where they charge 400, 500 bucks, because that's very far out of the you know typical person's
Yeah.
ability, right? But again, also when we went back to, like, I've seen some ticket prices that are $10, and that's, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like, make sure that you are getting the worth there, because 9 times out of 10, that location needs to pay somebody to be there and to be on that property with you. So that's money that they are putting out to make sure that there is somebody there. And that is also money that is being taken away during daytime operating hours. That means that that employee cannot be there the next day. And because these events are typically on Saturday nights, they're probably getting paid time and a half. And that also means that they might get an extra day or two off later, right? So they
Mhm.
need to you need to make sure that it's a value add for that historical location, for that location. And they typically are going to look out for themselves, right? That's not something you typically need to be like, hey, make sure,
Yeah.
they're going to do that for you. And so that's why they might say, well, $10 an hour is a little too cheap on our point. To make this something that is going to be worth it for us, we might have to mark this at $13 an hour.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing, somebody, said it was like a 5 hour investigation, 4 hour investigation, what have you, then you can kind of gauge that appropriately. So folks, are getting what they want to experience.
Now let's talk about the amount of guests you would have for an event, which would somewhat be determined by the size of your location. But there's a group of ladies here in the South that host paranormal events, and they will cram so many people into the tiniest location that I don't understand how anyone has a decent time. I mean, they're dressed up in costumes and they put on this little show and some dowsing rods, but I see pictures of their events and people are standing outside and
Hmm.
they're
Um,
very popular, but I just don't think there's a lot of value for the money with the amount of people that they have for these events. It's like you can't be experiencing very much when there's 75 people in a 1,200 square foot building. I mean,
yep.
Well, I mean, that's first thing out of everything is that the fire marshal puts in a quantity of people per
yeah.
building.
Mhm.
And if you go against that or do more than what that quantity says, then the location can be fined up
Hmm.
to whatever amount of money.
Yeah.
So right out the gate, if you're overpacking a location, you do run the risk of losing that location and b costing that location money when you're supposed to be
Yeah.
fundraising.
Hmm. Virgil said, can I ask you a question? Yeah, for sure. You guys throw questions in chat. Like,
Mhm.
let's derail this thing. Not in a bad way, but like let's ask questions, please, dear God. Let's ask questions. For sure. But yeah, like Chris said, you need to make sure that you are aware of what the limitation capacity is, because you don't want them to get shut down. Um, and you also shouldn't be treating these investigations as clown cars, right? Like for us, it again, it depends on the location, it depends on the size. But like I typically don't like to go over like the typical limit I put is somewhere between 8 to 10 people, because I also need to keep in mind that I will have at least 2 leads per group. So that means that I'm going to have anywhere from 10 to 12 people. Um, from there, if you move that up, the absolute limit, the absolute max I try to stick with is 12. Like 12 people per group. Again, that really depends on the location. If we go and investigate Scotchtown, for example, which is another historical location that we work with, one of the spots that we investigate is a kitchen house, and it's very, very small. All right. So, how do we combat that? The first thing is, you know, we keep our group sizes small. We realize, okay, what is the smallest location? We might be investigating the tavern, which is massive, but we also need to make sure we realize that it's not just the tavern. We're also going to, try to cram people into this smaller building here, and we want to make sure that they're having just as much fun here as they are here. And so we take that very much into consideration before we start planning these events. That this is, not only is this is the max amount of people that we can host, this is the maximum amount of money that historic location is going to be um, receiving. You
Yeah.
know, um,
And I will say it, like there has been some events where it's been 20 or 30 people, but usually with those events we're pairing up with multiple teams, like for the Tavern Paracon, we'll have a multitude of people, but like I said, we'll be pairing with multiple teams to help us out. And then everything gets divided accordingly to the locations that we're going to be going to. So we're never actually over capacitating that location.
Yep. And so, like, one of the things that Chris touched on is how do you handle capacity management in that aspect? And so, for example, at Scotchtown, when we go and we investigate this small kitchen house, right? We might it's almost impossible. I mean, you can fit 12 people in there, but like guess what? They're not going to have a good time.
Yeah.
And so what we'll do is we will split our group. When you get to that spot, not only can you investigate the kitchen house, and so we split it so that it's 5 and 5. So you have 5 people with one lead in the kitchen house, and then you might have 5 people and one lead outside of the kitchen house in the we have a herb garden. Well, they have a herb garden, not we. They have a herb garden right there, and this really weird piece of the property that is very, very active. It's not indoors; it's completely outside, but it's ridiculously active. We get tons of EVPs. We have shadow figures all the time out there. Like it's really wild. And so what we'll do is we'll say, okay, at this stop, yes, you have the kitchen house, but you also have this place as well. And so that way, if we say they get an hour at the kitchen house, well, they get 30 minutes in the kitchen house, 30 minutes in the herb garden, and then they flip flop,
And
right?
usually, like naturally, the groups figure out which way do they want to go. You know, some people, like we discussed earlier, some people are comfortable being in a small area with a group of strangers, and
Yeah.
some people aren't, and they're going to want that elbow room to be able to breathe and kind of relax. So they're going to naturally go outside where the other person might not want to go outside, and they'll stay in that kitchen house or office space or whatever it is.
Yep,
Mhm.
we've not had a problem yet that we've run into. Like we just let people naturally take the course that they want to, and typically, I mean, every time it's worked out.
Mhm.
There's a lot of cat herding to go along with it,
Mhm.
but you know people are really good at making their own decisions, and so that helps a lot when you have a smaller location. The big issue that you run into, oh look, there's Misty in chat. Virgil, I promise you we're gonna talk about that too.
Yep.
Heather's gonna read the question, she's gonna summarize it and read it. That's a massive
Yeah.
question. But one of the let's see Misty. Look at Misty. You see Misty in chat.
She
Now,
must
I
be a
want to
Uh
ask you. We're winding down town, but winding down with time. But I want to ask you something after you finish your thought. That's important too.
oh yeah. So one of the other things you need to keep in consideration is the location and the weather. So you need to make sure that if you are relying on one of your locations being outside, you got to plan for a plan B on this one, man. You have to make sure that if it is storming outside, you can't ask people to go out there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but nobody's going to go,
No.
and they're going to
Yeah.
look at you crazy, right? And so you need to make sure that you plan accordingly. You plan in advance. The weather is not always going to be on your side. So if you are planning that one of your spots is going to be outdoors, get a backup plan. If you don't have a backup plan, you got yourself a problem. Um, the other thing in terms of group management on this is I will get a list of all of the people that are going to be going to the event and that are paying to be attending the event ahead of time. And this sounds super stalkery, like stalkish, like way out the wazoo here, but um, we have people that are recurring guests, and so I make sure that one of my jobs when we're hosting events, is I'm not leading a group, but I'm going in, I'm checking on every group, I'm seeing how that group dynamic is. If I see people that are getting along, then there's a higher likelihood that they're going to be partnered with each other at a future event. If I see people that are having issues with each other, then I also take that into account, and I make sure that if this person and this person don't get along, I will not put them in a group together again because I want to make sure both of them have a good time. So I will kind of, this sounds weird, but I'll do some research. I'll make sure that if 3 or 4 people all bought tickets within the same 15-minute mark, they probably are all from the same team, the same group. They're all friends. And, I want to try to get those people together. Like they want to have a shared experience. They don't want to be, if I have 4 groups and each of them are across, one in each group, they're not going to have a good time. Right. Um, and I want to make sure that if I can partner up experience levels, like there are some folks that come to our events that have equipment, they have experience, they've done investigations before, they know what they're doing. I want to make sure that they are getting out of it what they want to get out of it so that, they're not sitting there listening to this is how you use this piece of equipment, this is how you use that piece of equipment, this is why we do this is why we don't do this. Right. And so again, I will take stock of that. I will make sure that if I can group some of my newer folks and make sure I put them with a strong lead that can explain those things, get them the experience that they want. Maybe I have some of the more experienced investigators. I put them with somebody that might sit back a little bit, let them run the show, but that's exactly what they want anyways, right? That is what they want to experience. They want to have the ability to investigate without being like tethered or on a leash. Um, so, that's that's kind of the things that I do, and those are things that I find to have been very successful. Um, and I group everybody ahead of time, way before the event. I have an Excel spreadsheet that says who are my leads for each group and who is part of that group, right? Um, then night of, everybody is assigned a group as part of that first hour, right? Everybody's assigned a group, and then I say at the very beginning, or at the end of, here's your groupings. I'll say, here's your groupings. Please remember your group number. That is who you're going to be staying with for the entire, for the duration of the evening. If you have any questions, concerns, or you want to switch groups, please let me know. And the other thing that I'll call out is if you have people utilizing Eventbrite, and they buy 4 tickets. I have had people concerned because what happens is when you buy 4 tickets, it's the first person, it's the person that bought the ticket, right? That is what's the name on there. And so, it might say Chris Vaughn, but Chris Vaughn's got 4 people going with him. And so I will make sure that it's very clear. Hey, listen, um, you know, if I call Chris Vaughn, that's Chris Vaughn and co. That's everybody that bought a ticket or that is coming with Chris. Um, I also make the stipulation that if for some reason they're with somebody and they're just like, you know what, f you, I don't want to be with you, I don't want to see you tonight. Then I give them the opportunity to move to a different team or a different group. I've never had anybody do that, but it always does get a chuckle. So I enjoy that. But I have had tons of folks where, if I didn't do the due diligence, if we didn't plan ahead, that we give ourselves time to make sure that the groups are the way that everybody wants them to, then you're sending people out to investigate and experience an evening, and they're not going to have a good time because they're not with their friends, they're not with their family. So I always make sure that that gets done with 15 minutes maybe afterwards, that people have a bio break, they can go and get their equipment, and then it also gives time for people to come up and say, hey, well, my name's John, I bought a ticket separately, but I really was looking forward to being with my friends over here that are in group 3. I'm in group 1, can you help me out? And then we make that happen, right? I make sure that people are going to have a good time because they're with their friends. They're also more likely to open up at that point. They're more likely to have a good experience because they feel more comfortable, than if they were just with a big group of strangers. So managing your groups, your group sizes, managing the people that are in your groups, how they're going to interact with each other, how they're going to interact with your leads. Especially once you get into it and you kind of have people that come, and investigate, they will have preferences. There are a lot of people that very, very specifically want to investigate uh, with Rhonda. There are people that very specifically want to investigate with Tiffany or with Chris. And so I try to make sure that that happens, right? I want people to have what they want to experience.
Advertising. How
So,
would you go about advertising
um,
for the event?
we will create flyers. Chris and I and a few of the folks on the team have some artistic talent, and so um, we will utilize that ability to create flyers. Big thing is making sure that you have the date, the time, the time length. So don't just say 8 p.m., right? It's 8 p.m. to a specific time. Um, we might put, if there's any special guests that are going to be there, etc. Most of our advertising, the majority of our folks that we get attending are from a few different things. First and foremost is Facebook. Getting it on Facebook, getting it on Instagram, getting it on your social media is important. Getting it on your website is important if you have a website. And the other thing is most of the locations that we work with, the historic locations, have like email blasts, right? Where once a month they might send out an email, or bi-monthly, whatever. We make sure that we get that listed on there. Make sure you get it out there, get the word out there, because we will get folks from Facebook and we get folks from the email blast. Those are really our two big points that we will bring folks in. Um, I have run things down all the way from, reaching out and contacting local newspapers, local news stations. Most of the big cities have like a calendar of events. I know Richmond has one. And so, depending on the event, when it is, what time, those sorts of things, we might submit that to those calendars so that folks that you wouldn't necessarily grab within your wheelhouse, um, you know, they will be able to locate and find that event. Um, Again, most of the folks that we bring in are kind of folks that we're getting on Facebook, getting from the email blast. But get the name out there. We don't because 100% of the proceeds go directly to the historic site. We haven't paid for advertising. If the historic location wants to do so, that is totally up to them. That is a risk incurred on their side, right? Um, but that's something that by far and large we just kind of we plan it out well in advance. um One of the big things that I always like to do is get events out at least 2 months ahead of time so that people can plan. I've got kids, lots of people have kids or they have pets that they need to make sure that somebody's taken care of. um you want to make sure that you give people enough time. 1 month is not enough time to try to find a babysitter or a dog sitter, or if they need to travel to get to your event, and they need to save up money, those sorts of things. You want to make sure people have enough time so that they can plan to get there and attend.
Mhm.
I had some questions from viewers, Heather.
Yep. Yeah. I'm actually, because they don't show up on StreamYard on my end all the way through, so I'm on Facebook right now. Virgil had mentioned to very long. Actually, I'm interested in his because that's stuff that I've been researching myself. But he is doing different thoughts of the universe in a thought experiment of mine as a road with a beginning and an end, as a time is a car. You drive with it, but no reverse gear. And the faster you go, the less you age because of time dilation, and you hit different markers quickly. And his question is, can we be visited from ghosts from the future?
God, so
Steve, keep it short. Keep it short.
how
Steve.
long do we have? Do we have
1
another
minute.
2 hours?
1 minute.
Oh God. Oh man, that's so hard. Like, so I totally believe in the idea of multiverse, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, then yes, theoretically you could be visited from, somebody from the future, because if you're looking at the idea of a multiverse, there's an infinite number of universes stemming off. And one of the ideas is that we're interacting with just a brief view, a brief moment of time, that you were just hitting another universe. If you look at the idea of universes as marbles just running into each other, then could be.
Mhm.
There's a 2 hour conversation I've had on that one
Yep.
with Chris. So
Yeah.
We'll have to schedule a show just around that because that's stuff that I'm researching right now.
I love it. We could talk
Yeah.
all day and all night on that one.
Yep. And then the other question came from Tara. She says, my question is for Steve, off topic. We attended the Beacon Theater at Hopewell, Virginia a year ago or more. You and Daniel were special guests. While listening and waiting, everything was fine. Then the lights cut off and we were put in your group. Go to the stage. I felt like I couldn't breathe, felt heavy. I felt sick and I had to leave. I told the lady to take us out and I could not get out fast enough. Once out, I was fine. I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't want to go back in. I didn't want to go back in. She repeated. We left, and then the staff was like, "You don't like, do you need anything?" Very courteous. I see the Hanover events and would love to attend. Do you ever come across guests with similar occurrences?
Um, so the Beacon is a very unique place, I think, because of the history that has occurred there. There is some pretty negative things that folks experienced in that place, that I think had a detrimental effect to the environment and what folks experience. I have been there safely numerous times. I've investigated with Ray and his team, RTL Paranormal and Fumeri, and I have run into not demonic but negative things there. Um, and I've like I remember this, and I remember that very same night we had to have somebody else leave because she was kind of feeling the same way that you were. Um, we haven't had that occur at the tavern. That doesn't mean that it won't, though, right? I can't tell you and say I promise this won't happen because I swear to God, if I did that, then it would happen, right? Like that is my luck. That is Steve luck right there. It would happen. Um, what I can tell you is, we would um we would totally like handle that in a very similar manner, get you off the property, get you out of the location, make sure you get back to a state that you are feeling yourself. It sounds like something, for better or worse, whatever it was trying to maybe communicate or connect with you. And maybe it just didn't know the best way to do that, or maybe it wanted to grab your attention and just couldn't. Um, so, it's hard to say. Like, will that happen? I don't think so. Could it happen? Sure. I mean, anything could happen, right? Like anything at all. A meteor could like land on the building while we're there. Like the likelihood of that happening is very slim, but it could. Um,
We
But
had
it's
I
hard to
don't
say.
know. I don't know this Tara. I mean, she could be super sensitive, maybe have some undeveloped abilities, but she
Mhm.
could, before she tries another investigation of this type, learn to do some self protection exercises or rituals or techniques that may make her feel more comfortable about going the next time. I mean, I don't know her, so I can't really.
Yeah, I wouldn't let it stop you. I mean, you
Yeah, there's
know,
ways around, to protect yourself and know how to identify if these energies are coming on and what to do when you do feel these energies coming on. How to
one of the other things that you
say,
could do is go ahead of time, right? The tavern you can just walk into, walk upstairs and tour around, and you will see not all of the location, but a good chunk of the location that you would be investigating the following night. The Beacon, has tons of performances. You could probably head into one and just hang out, and you probably have to pay, but you could go in and experience the location before you even step foot in there to investigate. And that is a very big thing on, um, when I went through a number of classes on leadership training, and one of the big things is if you're going to go and present, you should get into that space so that you feel comfortable there before you orate, before you present, right? The same thing can be said about investigating, right? Like it's healthy and it's a good idea to go and feel out the location during the daytime, if for nothing else, where you're going to slam your knees into later that evening, right? Like, um, that's where you are going to run into a wall or whatever. Like, you want to make sure that you can plan ahead. And so I would say, like, if you're concerned, head out. If you're close by, head over to the tavern, head over to the location. If it's Scotchtown, they offer tours. If it's Henricus Historical Park, they offer tours. It's low cost. All the proceeds go directly to the site, so you're still benefiting the site. But you have an opportunity to go and experience it ahead of time before you get into that situation, right? And so that's what I would probably suggest is, like, I don't think it's going to happen. I can't say for certain, but I would recommend going and feeling it out a little bit first before you dedicate to doing it. Alrighty. What else we got?
I think that's it.
Alrighty.
Yeah, we're all
Sweet.
caught up, and I reshared Hanover Tavern and also your guys' Facebook page.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And again, if folks, if you guys have any questions on hosting, I mean, we touched a brief bit about it. I mean, Philip and I and Chris, we talked about it for 2.5, 3 hours that one
Yeah.
night. And I mean, we talked from start to finish, and I think we got through the majority of it. There's still some pieces out there, but I feel like, it's make sure you think it through. Make sure you plan it out. It's not for everybody, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. There's lots of teams, and I think that there's this huge belief that to be an established team, you need to host events, and I think that that's very wrong. Um, there are tons of teams that we work with. They don't host events. They are purely research, and I think that's fantastic. I think there's all kinds, right, that make the world turn. So don't feel obligated that just because there's a team in your area that's hosting events, that doesn't mean you need to host events too, right? You can do you and what makes you happy and what makes you, you know, feel like you are, getting out of it what you want. Um, do that. Don't feel pressured into hosting events.
Mhm.
Do what makes you happy. That's the biggest thing, man.
Yep. Yep. And that's funny. That was actually the topic of my show yesterday. Was just do you and be happy.
Yeah, you do you, boo. You do you.
Yeah.
I always tell that. I always tell that to everybody.
Yep.
Is you do you.
Exactly. Well, definitely thank you. And you actually, everything you guys brought up is stuff that I already did on my events. So I think I might get back to doing them. Since we moved to Florida, I stopped, but we were
Yeah.
doing them in Vegas all the time.
For sure. Florida's a great spot. I mean, you get like man-eating gators and crazy people. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's the Florida man. We can go hunting for him.
You got Florida man. You got all sorts of things you can do. But yeah, I mean, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out because we could talk for a while on that and how to break down your size of your space. We could talk about how you manage expectations. I have a whole spiel that I give at the beginning of every investigation, every event that talks about what you can and cannot do. You can't bring food in. No, no smudging. No, no cleansing. We're leaving the location exactly how we found it.
No
Yeah.
Luigi boards.
No Luigi boards.
If you want to see his spiel, go on the Eventbrite and look up Stately Oaks Paranormal Encounters.
There you go.
Basically used everything he said because it was perfect. I mean, it's exactly what we needed. So if you want to read it, go on Eventbrite and look up our event and look at the rules because you'll see what he's talking about.
Yep. Yep. And if you
So-
guys are watching the replay, this will remain on YouTube and Facebook. So if you're watching the replay, you could also ask questions in the comments, and I monitor that. And I know Philip sees them every once in a while when he checks. I'm not sure how often you watch it. I never see you comment anymore.
I do. I don't.
Oh, do you?
But I go on the Pun Network too and look at those because I can't see them on ours because they're
Yeah.
all separate. And
I
Yep,
forget
it's
it.
all separate. I always
I forget
forgot
all the
about that.
time.
I do too. I felt so bad. Like the first time we started hosting Ghost Education, I completely didn't realize it was on Pun, and I felt so bad because I went back after like a couple of episodes, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like all these people were asking questions, and I didn't answer a single thing. Like I was just completely ignoring these folks. I felt horrible.
Yeah, there's no way to see them all at the same time simultaneously.
That's what I like
No.
about StreamYard. It shows all the comments from all the different locations, so you can get to
on
everybody.
your end, on the
On my
hosting,
end.
not for us, yeah. Can't see any of those.
I'm
Thank you guys
special.
so much. Really appreciate this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We'll definitely have to have you both on again. But you can also follow us at Ghost Education 101 on Facebook. And as I mentioned, we now stream live on YouTube. And that is actually Ghost Education, not Ghost Education 101. So I need to fix that. And then we will return on May 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern for a panel discussion on orbs. everybody's favorite topic. We're going to have David Taylor, Bill
Bring your
Slevin, Larry
favorite orb
Lawson.
photo for us to look at. Yeah.
If anyone has any, they can send them to me, and I can create a slideshow, and you guys can analyze them while we're discussing it. That would be perfect. So if you have orb photos, send them to me. I'm going to drive these guys crazy next time we're here.
I'm going to send you every picture of my Ring doorbell.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
All of the Ring doorbell pics.
Oh God, yes.
I'm going to go outside and shoot some photos of the sun and send those too.
And they argue with them when you tell them it's dust. So it's like, okay.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep. I always tell Bill that I go into the groups that he's in when he's talking to people, and I have my popcorn waiting to see how that conversation goes. But again, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you everybody for watching. We hope you have a fantastic week, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.